here we're riffing about. How would we set the context for this?
Well, I would like to set the context by saying that we are getting ready to launch.
Yes.
Our first digital product, and we're creating the Flow Network website.
Yes, this is all at the creative stage, at the early inception, not inception, because we've been thinking about this now for a year and a half.
Right. But it does feel like an inception in some way. It feels like we've gone through, here's the thing. So we are watching what we've created, the 3 different series we've created so far, which has really been the evolution of not only our relationship and our coming together,
Yes, because it's happened over a year and a half.
It's happened over a year and a half, but also the evolution of what's been going on in the world.
Right.
And so we created the series called The Big Play.
The big
game.
The big game.
The Big Game.
The big game.
And then
we thought the game sounded like it was a fun name.
Right. Like, oh, the life is just a game.
A game.
It's an illusion.
Yeah, don't have to worry
You're
about
the
it.
creator of the reality. And then we thought, well, it's not always fun. And
No.
game is associated with fun. So we called it The Big Play. Like, your life's a stage.
Yes. Like Hamlet, it's a big play, but it's not always fun.
It's not always fun. And then we said, well, in order to really adopt this understanding, you really have to go through a big pivot, a big inner transformation.
And it's the inner transformation is the challenge, because most of the challenges that we're faced with in the way we were educated was the challenge. If you can identify it, you're good. And the challenge in our society is out there. So the challenge out there is, business performance, or my relationship with somebody, or
my finances.
Your finances, or even the climate.
Right.
And so we're saying, okay, the climate actually is pressing us. The climate being the most obvious at the highest level of macro, because we're just now moving through the pandemic, and they actually are able to reverse engineer saying the pandemic, COVID-19, was caused, and it came out of China, and it was caused by there not being enough separation between the animal kingdom and us humans, because there's encroaching upon forests and that kind of stuff, which is a function of climate change. So climate change creates pandemics. That's our big problem. It's not.
Excited.
I get so excited.
And
exactly,
so we've gotten
that's not the
excited because
issue.
we've been in our what I was going to say is the last series we completed was called The Big Pivot.
Yes.
And so we've come through, even though we were intellectually understanding all of this, we've gone through our own deeper dive pivot.
Yes.
Which, circling back to what you said about this feeling like an inception, that we've gone through such a pivot, and all of this, it's almost like this tsunami, this wave of our understanding has now brought us to this place where we're very close to, launching the Flow Network, which feels like a baby. It's like my baby.
No, my baby for sure. We've been working on with this. This didn't think it was be called Flow Network, but we had been talking about this kind of thing since we started the business 25 years ago.
So it's like the most aligned, in the pocket. We just started doing a clubhouse, looking at different ways of engaging with people as business is becoming more and more online during these times. And we created this roundtable called Living Life on Purpose. And I think for me, the excitement to share it with you is that, we've actually been living life on purpose for quite some time. And
Yes.
the track of these series is demonstrating our passion and our enthusiasm to have these conversations about really this being an inner journey, and all the conversations that are happening out there about the challenges and the problem solvings really are the most important work is the inner reflection.
And you have to actually be somewhat schooled in the idea of self-reflection and reflective practice. So reflective practice is about watching things happen and then be reflective after the fact, so that you can be proactive when it's happening the second time, or the 15th time, or the 100th time. So we talked about the need for a big pivot. We didn't know what the specifics would be in March 2020 with this pandemic. But we started talking about that months in advance of that, saying there is a big pivot underway. There's going to be financial implications. We don't know exactly what is going to happen, but we can feel that something, because we can feel it inside ourselves, that some big change is going to happen. And as we were talking about it, and then it happened, the pandemic happened, oh my gosh, look at, we've been saying something like this was going to happen. So obviously it'll be very obvious to everybody that this is what we were talking about. Well, it's not until you've actually gone on your own particular journey to be able to go and be self-reflective that you learn about, okay, this is how I navigated this. And for me, calling it a big pivot, that meant something. For a whole pile of other people, big pivot meant nothing. And in business circles, all kinds of talk about big pivot and what did you do to pivot as soon as the pandemic happened, and all kinds of winners and losers as a function of those who pivoted well. And still the concept is to be able to go and learn from internal navigation. So we're just in the process of launching the Hero's Journey, our first digital project. And the idea with the journey, it's an inner journey. And don't follow the existing paths. And as we were actually saying, yes, look at this. This is not an existing path. This is not an existing path. Are you with me on that or no? Did you like that segue?
Yeah.
Because you did the eyeball thing. I wasn't sure if you were actually agreeing with me or saying,
no,
that's a bit of a stretch, Tim.
I think at this point in time we are pretty finishing each other's sentences after a year and a half of working together.
Yes.
And so for me, it's like Flow Network is the baby, and then the first product of being the hero's journey and it being this inner reflection, and that really is the journey that is the big pivot. It is this inner transformation of understanding that, you know, life is a stage, the world is a stage, and how do we want to show up in that space? And, you know, we call it a game, but there are points in your life where it's not fun. And yet, how can you, in your lows, and this is what I'm so excited about the hero's journey, is really bringing to that the awareness that even in your lows, there is such a rich self-discovery journey to go through, and that is a catalyst for the pivot.
Yes.
And so it's the excitement for, you know, not only launching the website, the whole Flow Network umbrella, but also having, you know, couldn't be more resonant to what the essence is of what I feel my purpose on the planet is.
Me too. And to be able to actually identify that it started off as the big game, then the big play, then the big pivot. Those are foundational. Like literally, Flow Network is built upon the foundation that we've talked about and filmed over the last year and a half. Mm-hmm. And what we're saying today, okay, so how can we frame this to help others in a community format start to reflect on the significance for them relative to this journey? Because that's what we're doing here. Is for us, this has actually got a huge amount of value because we're reflecting in such a way that we can accept the feedback rather than judge it. No, it shouldn't have gone that way. This is not the way it should have gone. It should have gone this other way. As soon as we can actually start to see ourselves participating in whatever way we want in everything that's happening in our life, we can start to be more proactive. Then we can actually start to accept it a little bit more. Then we can reflect more deeply. And then we can allow magic to emerge from within. And this is ultimately something you call the big wealth transfer.
Right. And it's really like when you say the proactive, it's like proactive to surrendering to actually you've never had control over the play, the game. The only thing we have control over is how we respond to what's happening in our play and in our game. And it's that response that creates your future realities. And whether you're existing in magic land and flow, and a part of the experiment of what the documentation of the evolution of our journey has been is to say, okay, my intuition is that we're supposed to work together.
Yes.
And I don't really know exactly how that looks like, and I'm not going to try to plan it and control it and organize it. I'm going to let go and surrender as often as I can to allow that to unfold. And in every now moment, you know, do the response of love versus fear,
right,
and lean into, you know, what my heart is telling me, what my impulse, what my, you know, inner inspiration is guiding me to do,
right, as opposed to out there,
and watch and document the unfoldment of that. Because I think that, and we have both had the experience of this this pivot and this change that needs to happen in our inner reality is scary, and it doesn't feel like a game all that much. But if we can demonstrate
doesn't
that,
even feel like a play.
no,
It's playfulness.
Sometimes you want to just get me the hell out of here.
Yeah.
But if we can demonstrate that in going through that process on our own, and then showing that there is meaning, there is, in those low moments, there is some sort of magic that is woven when we step back and understand that there is something bigger at play. And when we surrender to the flow of the universe, or the flow of some people call it a greater plan, we're literally being pulled into our purpose and into the service of why we're here. And it does appear like magic. And
it's when we reflect, it's in the moment. If we've actually we started a practice reflecting on the past and saying in retrospect, maybe it takes a year, maybe it takes 10 years, maybe in some cases it takes 20, 30 years to say, oh my gosh. I just spent some time with my mom earlier today, and she was correcting my interpretation that I shared with her on some event that happened to her, myself, and my dad. And I said, you know what, you were right, because at that point in time, that was my interpretation. But my interpretation has changed because there's some time that's happened.
Because you're not the same person.
And I'm not the same person. And I now realize this was that particular thing that was really painful was, in fact, of huge value to me. And it established a trajectory for the rest of my life. And my mom looked at me. It was this pause. And, okay. And then we're on to the next thing. Because it's only in the rearview mirror that we can actually reflect enough on something and get enough distance so that we can actually start to figure out what that was about. We can actually identify an up as maybe a down, or a down as an up. And then eventually when we can do that, because who cares? It's just feedback. Mm-hmm. It's neither high or low, good or bad, desired, undesired. It's just feedback. And the journey we human beings are on is the journey of self-discovery, which is made much more easier when we surrender to feedback than if in fact we judge it saying, geez, I got this, or I didn't get that, I was shooting for this. All of that meaning that we've come to assign to all of our results is something that we were actually taught by science to do, and then apply it to business, and it's good and bad and up and wrong, and there's a whole bunch of wealthy people, and I want to be wealthy, I don't want to be wealthy. And the big wealth transfer is to understand that the wealth, as you have said a number of times, the wealth is not out there, the wealth is in here.
Mm-hmm. And the big pivot is coming to understand all the stories and reflecting all the ways that we give our power, our value away to out there, and really reclaim that you have the power in your response. Like, are you going to respond with the judgment and fear?
Yes.
Or can you respond with acceptance and love? And when we do step into that space of responding with acceptance and love, we're literally stepping on our own unique path of magic. And this point of our evolution is, coming together. You mentioned the point of talking to your mom and having her perspective.
Yeah.
That's how we all learn and grow and evolve as a community. And so this whole idea of the Flow Network is to bring people who are interested in these types of conversations to the party, to say, where were you at in March? Where were you at when this happened? And what was going on in your life?
How did you interpret it?
How did you interpret it? How did you change? What did you learn? Because we learn when we share our own stories.
Yes.
And to be able to provide a platform and to invite the diversity of our perspective. And we often, have our challenges, but also great opportunity in the diversity of our age and our gender and our backgrounds.
Yeah.
And bridging those, for me, is so powerful. And I feel like that is what we're stepping into as a collective, is to understand that we can continue down a path of judgment and divisiveness forever.
Yep.
And
it's relatively easy to do.
And likely the planet will blow up relatively soon.
Yeah. Or it'll kick us off. More likely the planet will do fine and it'll kick us off.
Yeah, because we're not stepping in alignment with the truth of nature, which is unity. We're not separate from nature. We're not separate from the animal kingdom. We're not separate from one another.
Yeah.
Ultimately, we're all connected, and that is the conversation for the new world, is how can we have our differences? How can we have our different ideas and still coexist in harmony
Yeah.
and understanding, and use that as a point of celebration and growth and expansion versus, trying to fight things, right? Basically trying to fight, like, I'm right, I'm wrong, my voice has to be, you're, poo-poo this, and understand that, what is this, the saying, it's not about fighting the old, but just building the new. And I think there's more and more people who are in this space and wanting to be a part of the conversation, and understanding that, okay, if this is a big game or a big play, we're all the collective creators of what our future looks like. And when we, allow ourselves to understand that there is this magic, let's step into that.
Yeah, that is available to us always, 24/7. We just have lost our way in terms of how to navigate it. And I'm thinking of my son, who actually brought to mind for me that he had read something about Sadhguru, who was saying that the challenge is being responsible. So the ability to respond. The ability to respond with fear and judge and blame, or the ability to respond with what we're calling flow, which is about being able to accept and surrender and allow. And allow that magic to actually be present in our life. You have to actually, first off, unfortunately, get thrown in the swamp a couple times, because we don't tend to actually really pay attention when everything's going great. We don't pay attention to the mechanics. We pay attention to the mechanics after the fact, or even during it, the dives in the swamp. So the dives in the swamp that society seems to be going through right now, there's a huge value in reframing what that's all about. That's the hero's journey.
And reframing the value of being in the low, and finding the opportunities in the low. And Sadhguru also talks about, how in a world where we're very much rewarded for what we do and what we can achieve and do out there, there is no value for being present
in our society,
staying in our society right this second. And that's a part of what my passion is in redefining where we place our value. And that's what Flow Network is about, this whole wealth transfer of understanding when you value yourself, when you look inside, when you turn inside, and you're able to stay present in every moment with that acceptance and with that love. You're literally transmuting all of the old stories of where you've placed your value out there, which is the only thing stopping you from being able to be in the present and be in that flow of magic and
never live a life in fear.
And never live a life
from there on, right? As you do the transmutation enough over a period of time, you never experience fear as a local phenomena. You can experience fear, and other people are having fear, but there's where you really, bandwidth is really, really rising to the higher frequencies, and you attract the higher frequencies, which includes, fancy clothes and scarves and wonderful things, whatever it is that your heart desires.
Right, and also it's understanding, like, what do we really value out there? Like, I think now more than ever, going through this period of lockdown, we're realizing the simplicity of what it is that we actually need, right? Like, we need human connection. Like, the amount of people that I just saw a friend of mine say, I'm not usually a hugger, but I cannot wait to hug people.
Yeah,
that's like the physical connection, and what is it that we really honor and value as a species.
It's not until it's taken away.
Yes.
We're in the swamp and you go,
it's like, actually, I don't need this fancy this or that.
Yeah.
What I really need is just a hug from a human.
Yeah, yeah. And connect with a human in a heart-to-heart conversation.
Right. And be able to have intimate conversations where we're growing from one another. And it's these transformational connections and conversations versus just transactional. And that being a part of that wealth transfer as well.
So we really hope that the plan for this particular riff is to be able to go and place it in front of the foundation of the three series, I think, and then whatever else we had recorded. And the thinking was, in advance of turning on the camera and recording this again, was to be able to go and capture what is only obvious in the rearview mirror. Like, it's only obvious after a point in time that said, yes, this is why that was really important at that point in time, is because however we chose or other people chose to respond to whatever the feedback is, responsibility, the ability to respond, is going to dictate how the next event is and how the next event is. And we're shedding our identity, shedding our beliefs, shedding our stories constantly, or we're sticking with the old stories and we're just fighting to actually recreate the old triumphs when we were, younger. That is really the option that's presenting itself right this second. And we want to support people in learning how to let go of those types of things and then start to realize the value that is not particularly, it's not something that gets a lot of press right now in the conventional legacy broadcast media, social media, any and all forms of media.
Right. When my background in television broadcasting, that again was my passion for creating a network that is a new type of broadcasting, that is an inclusive, and it's not only supporting people who feel like they have things to let go, and maybe we'll always have things to let go. Maybe we'll always have fears that come up and that we have to lean into with excitement. But the point is also to be able to support people who've done a lot of the letting go and now are wanting to step up and share their stories and share their experience, their wisdom, and be a part of these types of conversations, really with this understanding that we're more powerful together.
Yes, it's exponential actually.
Yes.
Like it is literally, I got a math background, it's literally exponential. 1 + 1 = 1 billion.
It's the Fibonacci spiral.
Yeah. When it's a heart-to-heart connection, it's the Fibonacci spiral. It's exponential. Takes off.
And then so it goes.
And so we're moving from a life journey that was actually typically straight lines. We're moving from straight lines to circles to spirals. That's we're having the opportunity to do it over again, do it over again, do it over again until we actually get it, so that we can actually be expansive in that spiral, or we're going to continue to contract in that spiral. Very well conceived, this whole thing. Whoever thought of this thing in advance of us coming on the planet, say, here's a good idea, why don't we try this? It's a good plan.
Yeah, it's a good plan.
Well, I'm reminded of fruit flies like bananas, but time flies like the wind.